Yep, it is the weekend. So, what do you do for the weekend? You pick up a case. Welcome to the Super Pilotish channel. My name's Graham Wilson, and today in my basement, I'll be telling you how to teach stalls in an airplane. And what does that have to do with the wonderful case or, well, 12 pack of craft dinner here? Okay, so stalls in an airplane. That's actually, it doesn't have anything to do with that, but yeah, stalling in an airplane is when the wing isn't flying anymore. Now, that's not really such a great thing if you're flying around up in the air, but as pilots, we have to practice that stuff and learn how to avoid it. And but really, when your plane is sitting on the ground, it's stalled there, and that's not too dangerous. So, what I was going to do today was whenever you teach, you have to have your training aid, which is usually a little model airplane, and you'll see like even military guys everywhere out there, wherever you're teaching, there's someone with a little model airplane of some description. Now, this one was modified before because I was discussing what flaps do, and so I was thinking, okay, if I'm going to be using this today, I might have to do a little modification on this. So I'm going to take off my flaps, but it's kind of like, I don't know. I was thinking, I got that duct tape on there and it looks, I mean, that would work, but doesn't that look like that looks like a little trashy there? It's got, a little bit of speed tape there. So I'm just going to do a wing replacement on this today. Got some scissors. Time for some Christmas arts and crafts. Everybody got their Christmas gifts all done? Okay. Oh, what do we got in here? Oh, we got a leftover. Cool. Every pilot in Canada needs their craft dinner. Good, wholesome, cheap chemical food. Keeps you strong. Okay. So, yeah, that's how I made the KD12X before. Take this off. The original KD12X was made with the case here. And so that's the wing. So we're going to do a wing replacement here today. Is that the same? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, they're both the same each side. We have symmetrical case craft dinner wings. KD was originally craft dinner, but then everyone just started calling craft dinner KD, and then they just kind of rebranded it, I guess, or something. All right. Do I have to even cut this? It looks like it's corrugated. All right, here we go. Well, I'll cut it. I'll be a good exact training aid manufacturer here, because we spare no expense at the Super Pilotish channel to get the finest training aids around in the world. So, oh, hey, Shecky, I see you showing up here. Look at that. Ooh, you know what? I think that looks better. It's kind of like a different shade of paint. Paint of printing there. So it's like, yeah, that's the new one. That's the old one. So that's a little bit faded, I guess. How could that be faded? It's just sitting in my basement. All right, new wing replacement on the KD12X. And why is it called the KD12X? Because it says KD under here, 12X. There we go. That's where it got its famous name from. Okay, we're going to do our little wing replacement here. Little wing swap. You can also see it says 12X over here too. 12X. You got the KD12X. Make sure it's put on the right way for aerodynamics. Oh man, that's nice. That is a nice looking wing. Probably get another 5 knots off of that bad boy. Look at that. No flaps to slow it down. Okay, so we're going to be talking now that I have my training aid all set up. We are going to be talking about stalls. And so stall, like I said before, in an airplane, a stall it's not when the engine quits on you, which is very rare, but it's like when your wing stops flying. So you want your wing to always be flying. And so when I teach this to a student, or if I'm teaching it to an instructor to teach it to a student, yeah, this is kind of how I do it. And it's kind of a little trick that I thought up on my own, and I haven't really seen anyone else use this technique, but I ran it by somebody at Transport Canada, and they thought it was like a pretty good idea. So the first thing about teaching stalls, when you're going through you're learning how to fly, you go through various little lesson plans, because you're getting one little thing, and you kind of build onto that, and you build onto that, you build onto that. So you kind of go in little incremental steps. So I always find it neat when there's a student and they're like, I remember one student, boy, she just could not. What was it? There was something that she just could not do. It was like starting it, the plane. What was it? I don't know. There was at some point where she was just like checking the mags or something, and she always got it wrong. And then like after a few lessons, she was just doing it perfectly. And then I said, do you remember when like you could never do that? And she's like, yeah, that's right. I can do it now. So, a little bit of practice and moving incrementally, that's how you end up moving from a little tiny airplane like I fly all the way up to like big jets or fighter jets or whatever. But it all starts with, I don't know nothing. So here we go. We're going to teach about stalls. Now, the stalls are usually taught, the student will kind of have a little bit of a feel for the airplane, kind of fly around, climbing, turning, descending, stuff like that. But at the lesson where we start off at the best glide speed, we're going to find that one out. That's where the stall lesson is actually a little bit after when you do the best glide speed, when that's demonstrated. Oh, hey, Dustin. Hey, Wrench. So, yeah, the way we do that is that I'll have it where I'm flying the plane, and I tell the student, okay, you're going to be my secretary today. So you make up a little, I'll get my secondary whiteboard here. So just so you know, like a lot of students, it's pretty much done for every pilot that I've ever run across, but some places might not teach it this way. So we're going to find the best glide speed. That's the speed that the airplane can stay up in the air. For the, what can we do here? Best glide speed. No, sorry. I'm mixing this up here. It's your maximum endurance speed. So well, there we go. I just messed myself up here and did a bad example of what you're not supposed to do. I was going to get into, I haven't taught this in a little while, and I really wasn't looking at any notes. Okay, I just broke my very first rule. You're not supposed to teach things wrong the first time, which I just did. Oops. It's not the best glide speed. It was the max endurance speed. Oh, boy. Maximum endurance speed. Wah, wah. Oh, well. Even if you make a mistake, you just keep going. Okay. Ooh. Okay, now it doesn't even fit there, right? Maximum endurance speed. Ooh, that's where it really starts. And so that's when the airplane, it's a certain speed that the airplane can stay up in the air for the maximum amount of time. So, which means that you want to burn the least amount of gas. So the way you teach that is you do a little experiment. So you're going to have and speed. Okay, so you're going to have your student be the secretary, and you're going to make up a little piece of paper like that for the student to be writing down in the airplane. So we'll start off at whatever your regular cruise speed might be, or RPM might be 2200 RPM. And like, oh, speed, what do we got? Oh, maybe 90 knots. Oh, look at that. And then we're going to reduce that. And then you say, look at that. Okay. And then you reduce your power. This is all it's staying at the same altitude. So you reduce your power down to 2100, and then but keeping the same altitude, now you don't have the engine's not making as much power, right? So now you're going to have less speed. That's the way it is with aviation. It's like speed, power, altitude, all these other weird factors that all kind of trade off. But so there we go. We got that. And then you go down all the way, and usually somewhere around, you keep reducing it, and we're going to go down to something around 65 or 70 knots, depending on your airplane. We'll say 60 or RPM, or we'll go 1700 RPM. And what's that get me? That gets me about 70 knots, maybe. And then, you go to 16. And then what happens there is because you're trying to keep the same altitude, right? So as you're slowing down your RPM, you got to pitch up a little bit on the nose to get more lift, more lift, more lift, and eventually your airplane is going to get something not exactly like that. But an airplane can't fly like a helicopter unless you're like some I don't know, Sean Tucker or something like that. But it's yeah, you're going to get to a certain point and you're going to be maintaining your altitude. And at that point, your stall warning horn is going to go off. It's like modern planes, they have this little horn or some sort of noise that goes, eh, and it warns the pilot, hey, man, your wing is going to stop flying here pretty soon. So, all right, so wah, wah. At 1600 RPM, we will no longer be able to fly. So, anywhere between this number that you found here and your stall speed, that's considered slow flight. So that's not the way you teach that lesson. But the key that I wanted to show you there was that as you're pitching up your nose flying around, when you hear that, that's when you actually teach your first stall recovery, because that means like, oh, we're going to stop flying. So that's where you can tell the student, okay, well, we're going to stall, full power, lower your nose, and you maintain your altitude, keep going down. And that's kind of a very sensory thing when that happens, because you're reducing your power back, so it's getting quieter and quieter and quieter. Then you hear and then get it kind of wakes up the student. Whoa, what happened there? Well, what happened there was your very first approach to stall recovery. And so if you do that right, it uses the learning factor of primacy, which means teach it right the first time, which I didn't do here with my speed. Oops. Wah, wah. But no one's perfect. So, okay, so then you go on and you start teaching your slow flight lesson on the next one. And at that point, you're going to be teaching, you're going to teach the student how to not be afraid of stalls. Now, sometimes people are, hey, Jordan's here too. Hey. And yeah, so some people, believe it or not, are afraid of the wing not flying. So, but it's not a desirable state, really. But you have to be able, as a pilot, to operate the machine at whatever you got to make that thing do what you want. And part of that is not just at high speed, high power settings. It's also could be low speed, high power settings. It could be low speed, low power settings. You got to use the full range of the aircraft. So, so what we're going to do here. So when we go into teaching slow flight, we're going to play a little game. I will call it the slow flight game. This is my little secret sauce. Okay. So now the student's already seen how, we're going to avoid this stall. And now you play the slow flight game with them. The way that game is played is you'll put the plane into this slow flight range, which is below that maximum endurance speed, and so you're going pretty slow, and you're going to be pretty close to the stall. So you're going to have, or it's going to be really uncomfortable in the plane. You're flying around. You got the nose way up in the air. The controls are all mushy because there's no air flying over your control surfaces, and it's just all. Might even be shaking a little. It's like, it's all gross. Like, this ain't cool. So what you want to do is we play the little game. Well, remember when I said that as it gets up to the stall, there's like a little warning horn that goes off. So the way that you shut that thing off is you just lower the nose a little bit. And then, your speed kind of comes back. Or the thing that makes it go off, it's that factor's not there anymore. So the stall warning horn will go off, and then you want to turn it back on. You pitch up like this, turn it off. Boom. So now you have so you can kind of demonstrate to the student first. Look at this. Look, I lower the nose, it goes off. Lower the nose, goes off. And so then you say, okay, student, you try it. And then, so you get the student flying around. You could even turn and do some other stuff. But the whole time you're playing this game of turning that enunciator, that little warning horn, okay? The way I turn it off is I push forward, push forward, push forward. So what you're doing there is you're getting them to the learning factor of primacy the first thing they're learning about when I hear that horn, lower the nose. And so that'll come in handy later on in their flying career, where if you're, and unfortunately, most of the accidents happen like that when you're coming into land. Excuse me, and you're coming into land, you're not watching your airspeed enough, and that's when the airplane falls out of the sky, and that's not good. So we want to avoid that. And but way I playing my little slow flight game, where you're always just kind of, oh, I hear that thing, lower the nose, hear that thing, lower the nose. So you kind of enforce that very right away into the student's brain. So 10 years later, when they're coming into land, they hear, it'll be a natural reaction to just stop pulling so much on the controls. And hopefully the plan is to save some airframes and lives. So yeah, so I kind of do that. And that's why that's kind of important. So the little slow flight game, it was really neat that I was teaching instructors how to teach my technique. And then later on, I went to do a flight test with someone because I was an examiner of someone that I taught them how to be an instructor. And their students started playing my little game on the flight test. And I thought, wow, cool. And that's a really a good example of how things that the good habits that you teach right away, they can go on with into other people's careers, and you're influencing everyone else in a positive way there too. So that's pretty cool. I was like, hey, I know that game. I taught your instructor how to play that game. So the slow flight game. Yep. And then another thing too. Um, One of the things about pilots is that we're usually, I don't know, they're relatively quiet people, and we just like enjoy flying around and checking out the view, and everything's cool. Um, so, uh, okay, here we go. I guess I'm trying to think what tip I should write down here. So there's a natural reluctancy for most people that are pilots to make like large movements. You don't really want to make abrupt movements in the airplane, but you might have to make some large movements with the controls more than you're used to, and making lots of noise. So we're gonna say, when you are getting low on airspeed, you are going to have to make some noise. Let's give an explanation or exclamation points on that. Two of them. Do not be afraid of making noise, because engines sound awesome. So make some noise. But I've seen that where on flight tests or I don't know, just teaching lots of students, anyways, that you kind of don't want to be making large movements, making lots of noise, like with the throttle, making the engine roar. But sometimes it is required to make that engine roar. Just like when you take off, you give it full power to take off in most airplanes. And so that makes a whole bunch of noise. And it's kind of unnerving for the mild-mannered pilot out there. But sometimes you got to make some noise to get the plane to do what you want, so that you can be safe about things. So yeah, so that was about it for that's how I teach my stalls. So we're going to use the learning factor of recency here and review that. But yeah, so when you are an instructor and you're teaching this, and of course I should tell too, is that if you want to try to introduce any of these little techniques of my teaching to your teaching, run it by your boss and make sure that's okay. Your boss will probably think, oh, I never thought of that. But or you might be doing that already. And I just, because one of those things you think, oh, I'm a genius, and you think of something, you Google it, and then someone else thought of it. So, but anyways, here we go. So when you're teaching stalls, the first time that they see that type of lowering the nose, giving it full power, lots of noise, is when you're on your maximum endurance speed lesson, where you're reducing your power and having the student record the speeds. Remember that? Okay. Then you play the patented super pilotage slow flight game here next with your awesome KD-12X. And so that's the game where you fly around and you keep the same altitude, but you're turning the stall warning horn on and off. Lower the nose. Lower the nose. And you don't have to worry too much about changing the power setting when you're doing that, because there's so much drag here, and the difference between the warning horn going off or off and on, it's really only a couple knots, and that won't affect your. It really doesn't affect your altitude at all because you got so much drag and power going and stuff. So, and do not be afraid to make some noise. If your plane is not going to be flying, you have to make some noise to keep it flying again. So, there we go. That's how I teach it, and I'm quite happy with my new paint job on the KD12X. It's looking pretty sharp now. I like it. I'm liking it. I'm loving it. KD, I'm loving it. Isn't that what they say on here? I don't know. That's some kind of. I'm just gonna look over here. I'm loving it, or what is that? McDonald's. I'm loving it. Some kind of McLovin it. I don't know. Anyways, yeah. So that's about it for today. I'll check out and see if we have any. It was a little bit piloty today, but it is the Super Pilotish channel, and so what else can I tell you there? Yeah. I don't know if you could use any of those techniques or anything for teaching someone how to do something else, but probably. Okay, what do we got here? Oh, here we go. Yes. Does an F-16 actually stall? Yeah. So on my thumbnail, I just like grabbed, okay, one of the U.S. Thunderbirds, awesome Air Force demonstration team. Does an F-16 stall? Yes. And there's actually a pretty famous video about that. When there was a guy, he was doing a loop, one of the Thunderbirds actually. So I don't know, maybe subconsciously that's why I made the thumbnail. So the Thunderbird guy, I forget the investigation. What was it? I think the accident investigation or something showed that like these the guys that are doing air shows and aerobatics and stuff like that, they set their altimeter to 0 like on the ground here. Usually all your altitudes are done by height above sea level, or your altitude above sea level, ASL. Okay, and then but when you're doing aerobatics, you set it to 0 on the ground. So if you're up in the air, okay, when I'm coming around off of a loop, I should be aiming for 200 feet above the ground or something. That's 200 feet's like kind of your usual kind of air show altitude for a lot of flybys and things like that, unless you get special, training to do other stuff like those crazy inverted guys around the ground. That's extra. But from what I hear, so yeah, so I think he didn't set his altimeter correctly, if I'm remembering right. So the Thunderbird F-16, he was doing his loop, coming around. But the thing is, he started his loop too low to the ground. So when he was coming around, he didn't have enough margin of error there. And so when he was pulling out, he actually, whoa, here comes the ground, and he yanked back on it and actually stalled it. So you can stall any airplane coming out of like a dive or a loop like that. If you just yank it back, you could be like this, but because you've already started going down and you instantly make it like that, well, there's all this angle of attack stuff going on. So he actually stalled the plane here. He ejected, and then this turned into a fireball, but he got away okay. He ejected at the last minute and everything was cool, but lost the airplane. But hey, what would that be? Any landing you can walk away from, or I don't know what the Air Force says, of any landing you can parachute away from is like okay or something. But yeah, so he stalled it on the pullout of the loop. So you can stall in F-16. Every airplane can stall. It's but there's usually a lot of measures in there too. For I'm sure there was some heavy stick shaking going on. There's stick shakers. There's what else is there? I know on a PC-12, Pilatus PC-12, if it starts approaching the stall, the yoke it'll just slam out of your hands and it will lower the nose for you. But if you could probably still stall that too, if you like, if that the circuit breaker gets pulled on that mechanism or it's not functioning that day. Every plane can stall, so you got to be careful about that. Okay, good question though. I like these questions. Okay. Yeah. And yeah, so another good statement here by Wrench. He's found that many instructors disagree about how aggressively a pilot is supposed to react to a stall. When asked to stall, I always tell the check ride instructor that I will be aggressive. Yeah, sure. Um, yeah, it is one of those things. That's why I figured I'd throw this out here. How I teach stalls. It's kind of a real, uh, yeah, it's kind of a personal thing, and it has to do with the attitudes of the teachers and the or the instructors, and yeah, and some of the instructors hate teaching stalls. Like some people are like, some instructors are scared to death of stalls. They'll do it, and they're proficient to do it. But I know instructors that like stalls and spins, especially. They'll be like, I never want to spin a plane ever again. I'm never going to be an instructor. And then they're off happily, flying their 777 around out of Dubai or wherever, like they're fantastic airline pilots giving a nice smooth ride to the passengers there. And I bet you the smoothest of the smooth there, they hate spins and stalls and all that other fun stuff. But yeah, and then you can also have some real ham-fisted, aggressive instructors. It is, I don't know. I guess it's kind of like playing guitar or driving a car or something. Everyone's kind of got their own style. But as long as we're all safe, that is the main thing. And it is always good, Wrench, to say that you'll be aggressive. I would say quick instead of aggressive, maybe. But yeah, because if that ever does happen close to the ground, you do want to be pretty quick about that. So, and good communication with someone flying in the cockpit is always a great idea. Okay, what else we got here? We got some other coffee talk going on over here. Oh, here we go. Another one here. Wrench, our resident pilot in the chat. He's always been most concerned about departure stalls in a turn. Yeah, I can see why. Crashed radio control planes there. No instructor has you practice stall turns unless spinning. Well, I know here in Canada we do. Yeah, we actually do teach and test stalls in a turn, climbing or descending. Like you want to have, what would it be? So we usually do some sort of a when you're tested for your flight test, you have to show for the private pilot license. Anyways, you got to do a power off stall and a power on stall. Power off stall, you usually just say, okay, pull the power back to idle and then stall the plane and recover it. Okay, they do that. And then for the power on stall, it could be either full power to simulate you're stalling the plane after you took off, or maybe kind of like to simulate as if you took off and your plane wasn't producing full power and you keep pulling back by mistake and you stall it. How to recover. So we are tested, and that is taught and tested here in Canada. Not sure how it is with the FAA in the States over there, but it's really the way I would teach that type of thing. And I always do have it's really wild if you ever give your student a like a full power stall. So that's to simulate you got full power, you took off, but I don't know, you're distracted and you just keep pulling the nose up, pulling the nose up. And because you have all that power on, the nose is like way up in the sky and like you can't see the horizon. You're like climbing up like this. But the thing that not really to worry about too much in real airplanes there, Wrench, is that it'll be so weird if you got full power and you're climbing out like that. You'll be like, okay, this is nuts. I'm going to push the nose down. You won't be stalling. In a radio controlled airplane, okay, you could take off, but you're not sitting in there. So you're just watching the plane do its thing. And so, yeah, you could easily stall it on takeoff for a radio controlled plane because you're not feeling the G's. You're not seeing the uh, the view changed so drastically that, like, wow, this is weird. So I would say, and a lot of times if you're not coordinated, if you don't have that ball in the middle on takeoff, you'll have a high probability of having a wing drop. But the thing about that too, if you're taking off, you already have full power on. So when it stalls, okay, it's going to come down like this, and now you have full power, so it's going to start flying again. So you really won't lose that much altitude if you do it at all. So okay, there we go. Oh, that's funny. Well, there you go. Next time you fly with an instructor, ask him if you can check that out. That's another thing. If you are flying, every once in a while, you fly with an instructor. Make a list or like write it down and keep it with your flight bag or something, like stuff you'd like to try. Maybe you're not comfortable with it just on your own. It would be legal for you to do it on your own, but if you're not too comfortable, do it with an instructor, and then you can say, I love that when someone comes to me and says, like, hey, I haven't done this in a while. Can we do that today? I'm like, yeah, let's go for it. And that is ideal. Oh, Greg's in here too. Hi. What do we got here? Greg McNeely. You should visit the Evergreen Museum in McMinnville, Oregon, home of the spruce goose. I thought the spruce goose was down in Long Beach or something like that. Oh, maybe that's where it was built in Oregon. But yeah, I should. It's just about, I don't know, there's all kinds of cool air museums out there and stuff like that you can check out. If I'm ever in the neighborhood, I will. Yeah, I went down the U.S. Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio. That's awesome, man. And we have a little one here in Windsor too, the Canadian Aviation Museum. Here we go. Safety Doc's here. Hey, welcome to the show, David. Okay, so Safety Doc is asking, asking, yes. I was like, is that a statement or is it asking? Okay, heard you need about 10 pounds of force to override autopilot if a plane's software is detecting risk situation. Is that accurate? I don't know exactly the 10 pounds of force, but one of the standard checks on airplanes with autopilots is especially the little ones. I'm sure they must do it on the big guys too, but in the little ones for sure, it's like you test before you take off. You're doing your run up, as they call it. You kind of rev up the engine, make sure all your gauges are green and everything's cool, and you should be able to override the autopilot. So if the autopilot's on, if you grab the controls and just manhandle it the way you want, you should be able to overpower it and it should kick off. And if you overpower it, the controls, because you just grab, the plane's doing something I don't want, or the autopilot's malfunctioning, you have to be able to override that. So you check that on the ground before you go and get up in the air. And I'm not sure if they do that on the big jets. I bet you they do. But in little planes that I've flown, you always do that. So you engage the autopilot, it'll start turning on you, and then you just overpower it, and then there'll be a big loud beep goes off to tell you, okay, your autopilot just kicked off, and you're flying the plane now. So yeah, so 10 pounds of force, I'm not sure, but they are tested and they must be able to disengage with the pilot overpowering it. And yeah, so that's the way that is. There was something there. Yeah, I had someone else had the autopilot going and they were overpowering it. I forget. Or I think that's that's funny because I remember there was one. Yeah, I don't know. That's weird. Usually it'll kick off like that. I'm just thinking of this one situation where it wasn't a full 3-axis autopilot. It was just kind of something that would maintain your heading. And there was a student out doing practicing touch and goes and landing and stuff. And they're like, the plane was the student came back. She's, boy, the plane always wants to turn to the right. So we got in there, and it turns out the autopilot was on, and it was like it was kind of malfunctioning, but the student still landed the plane and did a bunch of takeoffs and landings, fighting the autopilot the whole time. So yeah, I think that's what happened. But we never used to really test that, and I think the student turned on the autopilot by mistake. So, anyways, yeah, that was a weird one. If you can think of it in aviation, it'll happen. Oh, okay. But anyways, that's all I know about the autopilots there, David. Okay. Oh, okay. When it comes to safety, we're talking safety, Doc. That's for sure. Okay, so you also heard new pilots might struggle to understand attitude. Yes, attitude, plain tech term. Yep. And trim. Recent crash here in U.S. of new pilot in this situation. Yeah, it's the attitude. Well, that is actually taught on the very first lesson here in Canada, and it probably is taught in the States. But some instructors are better than others. But yeah, and by attitude, there's three attitudes here. You got your so your regular cruise attitude or level attitude, nose up attitude, back to level, and then nose down attitude. And so that's what they mean by attitude. And then you got your bank there too to make you turn. But yeah, that's usually taught on the very first lesson, and so that the student understands when the instructor is saying something, they'll understand. We need a nose up attitude in the climb. Okay, and then you go on. You have to know those attitudes before you teach climbs and descents, and all this other stuff. So I'm kind of curious about that. Or another possibility there too is like, what's the native language of the pilot too? Sometimes that can be a bit of a factor, and it's the instructor's job, regardless of the language ability of the student. It's the instructor's job to make sure that they understand. So, oops, don't like hearing about that. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, there we go. I'm just yakking all about airplanes here today and stuff like that. Oh, Nanya Business popped in to say hi to you. So, hey, Nanya. Okay, so that is about it. Yeah. All right. So today, thanks for indulging me in yakking about airplanes, as pilots can do that all day long. Oh, there you go. Okay, well, Safety Doc is back at it again, so we'll have a little convo here. Good clarification. You're welcome. I think issue a question: was the instructor doing too much for the student in the flight school, including all radio communications? Yeah, it's one of those things. Introducing radio communications with the student, and it really depends. It's a very individual thing. You never want to like overwhelm the student. Say this on the radio, do this, you're doing this wrong, watch your altitude, watch your airspeed. And if you do that with a brand new student, you will freak them out. They'll freeze up on you. Their brains go on like this, and they'll freeze. And I've had students freeze on me because I thought I was taking it at a pretty decent pace. But then sometimes other students will they'll dwell on something and beat themselves up about it a bit more. So where I think, oh, he's over that. His brain's still thinking, oh, I screwed up back there. Like, that was 15 minutes ago, man. We're flying here now. Forget about that. Can't do anything about that. But people will dwell, and then you add some new stuff in there, and then the brain starts working too much, and they'll just freeze. It's pretty weird when they do that. And you're coming into land, and they just don't do anything. Hey, you got to turn. Yeah, no, the runway's back over there. Okay, I have control. Then they're like, whoa, what happened? That happened to a guy, like, we were doing a spin too, and he just froze up. So he's like, we're going like this. And I said, okay, recover from the spin. And he just like jammed his jammed his feet against the rudder pedals. And we were like, I'm like, I kind of recovered the plane, and oh well, that's what they pay you the money for. Anyways, okay. Very good. All right. So okay, that's about it here. So today is Friday, and I'll be back on Monday. I'll be doing another middle management Monday. I don't know. We'll kind of do something how to be a good boss on Monday. And hope you guys all have a great weekend. So I'll be back on Monday. Why? Because I do this Monday, Wednesday, Friday at noon Eastern, and we'll just kind of shut her down. You guys have a great weekend here, and thank you, plural, for watching. Bye.